Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to the channel and welcome back to a new video. If you guys have been following me along on the STI journey, you know that I have ran multiple sets of wheels, as well as different brands, specs, and colors, many different types of tires and sizes and everything. So what I wanted to do in this video, kind of go over every single wheel setup that I have ran on my STI. This is a question I get all the time about, hey, what are those wheels? What are those specs? Now I have done videos on each specific wheel, so I thought it was a good idea to make one video going over all the different sets of wheels. So if anybody's interested in one specific one, they can just scroll through and find that specific wheel setup, hear all the specs, hear my feedback, how I got it to fit and everything. I will try to remember all the camber specs and alignment specs with those setups. Since I did change up things a lot with the different setups, I will try my best to remember everything and inform you guys and give you all the details. But let's go ahead, let's sit down and let's go over the multiple sets of wheels that I have ran on my STI. Okay, so obviously I bought the car back in 2017. It came with stock wheels. I never was a fan of any of the stock STI options in terms of wheels that it came with. I was not even a big fan of the BBS wheels that came on the limited STI from 15 to 17. So for me, getting a base model was important because I didn't want to pay for wheels that I knew I was just going to upgrade at some point. But either way, the OEM 18s that came on this car, the color was okay. Obviously the spec was terrible. They're super sunken in and it's just not my taste. I don't like the OEM 19s that come on the 18 pluses either. So any of the OEM options, not a fan, but these came with the OEM 18s. I'll put up a picture for you guys here. But I quickly decided to sell those off and get my first set of aftermarket wheels on this car. First set of wheels that I got on my STI were one of my favorite wheels. They are Gramlight 57DRs. I picked them up used. I bought them for a really good deal. I think I got the whole entire set for like 1,200 bucks. They were in satin black. They came with very, very used summer Dunlops. So I did run them for a little bit just to try them out, but they were exceptionally loud since they were so worn, and I wasn't a big fan of them. But either way, I knew I was going to get new tires, but they were 18 by 9.5 plus 38. So a very, very common and basic wheel spec for these cars. It's one of those specs that you can just throw on the car and be pretty much okay. It fills out the fenders very, very nicely, and you don't need to do too much work in order to get them to fit. I absolutely love that set of wheels. It's basically like a TE37 on a budget. Really, really chunky looking wheels, 6 spokes, and it really fit the car very, very well. I ended up getting the black center caps to work with them. They look very, very nice, and I also got some custom decals made for the Gramlights just in white. They normally come with either red or blue decals, which I wasn't a fan of. And being that I always had a white theme on this car, I decided to get some decals made in white to match the car, and they looked really, really good. I love that setup. It was super simple. I didn't have to run anything crazy in terms of alignment specs. I actually put those wheels on before I did coilovers, which is a big no-no. Usually I do coilovers first and then wheels, or both at the same time. But I knew I was getting coils very, very soon. Literally, I got them probably the next month. But I threw them on the car anyway. They looked cool, but the wheel gap was insane. But overall, I ended up getting coilovers and lowering it down, and it looked great. I didn't have to run that much camber. I think it was around like -2 or so. So it wasn't that bad. It was very, very street friendly. And it was a really nice setup. I'm a really big fan of it. And I always told myself I would love to go back to that wheel setup and try it out now that the car is lower and I'm kind of more familiar with it and I can get it to fit better. In terms of the tire that I ran on those wheels, I ran one of my favorite all seasons, which are Continental DWS06s in 265/35/18. The car at the time was my daily driver, so I needed an all season that can handle all types of weather. And it was a really nice setup, really simple, really easy, and very easy to clean, might I add, since there was not many spokes. But after a while with those wheels, I knew I wanted to move on to a new set. And this next set is probably the wheels that you guys know most on this car. It was a set of wheels that not many people were running at the time. Now I see so many people running them. Not necessarily because I ran them on my car, but just I guess now people are realizing how well they fit and how well they look. A lot of people are running them now. Those wheels are the Enkei RS05RRs. Beautiful wheel. A lot of people didn't run them at the time, from what I believe is because a lot of the sites, a lot of the vendors that did sell them said they didn't fit the 2015 to 17, or at least the older style Brembos that came on the STI. The bigger 4-pot black ones that came on from 08 to 2017, and then they switched over to the larger acid green ones, the 6 pots up front in 2018. But either way, I decided to take a gamble and I picked up a set. I got them in the gunmetal color. You can get them in black, bronze, or gunmetal. The specs on them were 18 by 9.5 plus 35. So it was a little bit more aggressive than the previous set on the 5070Rs. It was only 3 millimeters more pushed out. But the first thing that I did was actually take them out of the box and test fit them. And lo and behold, they fit no problem. There was clearance on the brakes, and the rest was history. In terms of the tire that I ran on those wheels, again, this was my daily driver still at the time, so I needed an all season. But I decided to go with a little bit better all season. I have ran these tires in the past as well on different wheels on different car. And I realized that they drove much better in the dry. Now the Continental DWS06s, they are fantastic in the wet and snow. Those tires, I actually use them on my OEM 17s, on my 2013 WRX. I use them as my winter set. Fantastic in the snow, but I realized in the dry, they were a little soft, kind of a little floaty. So I wanted a tire that performed a little bit better in the dry. So I picked up a set of Michelin AS3 Pluses, which is my favorite all season, 100%. They perform much better in the dry. Honestly, it's pretty surprising what those things can do, but they don't perform as well in the snow. They're fantastic in the wet, but once the snow hits the ground, it can get a little fishy. I ran 265/35/18s on those wheels. I will say the more aggressive fitment on those wheels, it did make me have to roll my rear fenders. Those are the wheels that made me do that. Any other set that I did run in the future was because of those wheels. Now, in terms of alignment specs, it was around the same. I was running around -2 or so in the beginning, and then I eventually wanted to go lower with the car in terms of the coilovers, so I had to dial up a little bit, and it ended up running around -3.5 all around. I didn't have any rubbing issues. I was totally fine. I can drive as aggressive as I wanted, and I didn't have any problems. I also ended up throwing on some 3mm spacers in the front and rear just for a little bit more aggressive fit. So there ended up being +32. It wasn't for clearance of calipers or anything like that. It was just because I wanted to run something a little bit more aggressive, but it didn't want to have to go too crazy. So the 3mm spacer bumped it out a little bit, and it really, really looked good. I ran the same tires and everything. I did have some scrubbing a little bit with those spacers on, but it wasn't anything crazy. It was on the fender liner, not the actual fender. But if you are wanting to run the Enkei RS05RRs with 265/35s, you are definitely going to have to roll your rear fenders. There's no question about it. And I definitely recommend throwing on some rear lower control arms as well, so you can dial in the camber and make sure you don't ruin your tires. Now, the coloring on those wheels, they were gunmetal. I love that color. I think it fit the lapis blue pearl very, very well. Now, like I said, a lot of people run those wheels now, and they literally work on any color STI or WRX. It is such a good color. They held up very, very well. No chipping, no scratching or anything. They were more of a satin finish than a matte, or they definitely weren't a gloss, so it was a good mix between. They cleaned up very, very well. I never had any issues with it chipping off or anything, so great set of wheels, highly recommend them. And I always go back and look at pictures of the car with those on. I'm like, man, that would be really cool to throw another set of those on the car right now and just see how it would look now that I'm much lower, more aggressive. Now, after running the RS05RRs, again, those were probably one of my favorite sets that I ran on this car. I ran those for 3 years. That was actually the longest set of wheels I have ever owned. I was one of those people that just changed wheels all the time. In my WRX at one point, I went through 4 different sets of wheels in 1 year. So I was always trying to find the perfect wheel, the perfect fitment, try new things out, do some swaps and everything. It was a lot of fun. I enjoyed it. But the Enkei RS05RRs, it was one of my favorite wheels, and just how long I owned them for and ran them on this car was a true testament to show you just how much I love those wheels. They were great. But after running them for so long, I wanted to change it up and I wanted to try something different. I think this car looks fantastic with 10 to 12 thinner spoke wheel setups. I just, for whatever reason, it just fit the body very, very well. And I really wanted to pick up this next set of wheels. I actually ran these same wheels on my WRX. They were the predecessor. They were the WedsSport TC105Ns. And then after that, they came out with the TC105Xs. It was the same exact wheel, but they cut out a bunch of weight. So I picked up a set of WedsSport TC105Xs, an 18 by 10 plus 35. I got them in their color called Titan, which is a gunmetal. It's a little bit more chromy, a little bit more shiny than a normal gunmetal, but it's a really, really good looking finish. They had enough concave to look really good. Had a really deep socket center section. And it just looked great. I ran the Gold Project Kicks hub rings in those with the Titanium Works titanium axle nuts. And it's funny because I see a lot of people running those same hub rings now on those wheels or other wheels that don't run center caps. So it's funny to see that. But love those wheels. They were great, super aggressive. I ran 265/35/18 Michelin PS4Ss. At that time, this car became a garage queen. I did not need to drive it every single day, so I didn't have to worry about all different types of weather. It was only going to be taken out on dry, warmer days. So that allowed me to get a dedicated summer set of tires. Now, in terms of alignment specs, I believe they were around the same, -3.5 all around. Didn't change up the alignment much when I ran those wheels. I did go a little bit lower overall, but it ended up being around the same camber, so it was around -3.5 all around. Pretty aggressive. The fronts, I ended up throwing the 3mm spacer on just for a little bit more aggressive fit. Nothing for clearance or anything like that. You don't need to run them. Tons of caliper clearance. I loved how those wheels looked, especially when you were driving by a shop or a store that had mirror windows or something. You could see the car rolling, and they just looked super, super good. However, one of the things that I did not like about those wheels is actually the finish. Not the color. The color looks great. However, the finish is just very poorly done. I had the same issue on my TC105Ns on my WRX. Those just chipped very easily. So if a rock hit them or anything like that, the finish on them would just kind of chip away very easily. Not that I had any flaking issues or anything like that, but they just got very, very worn for the short while that I had them. I only ran them for about a year, year and a half, maybe 2,000 miles. They had more chips and scratches on those wheels than I did on my Enkei RS05RRs, which I ran for 3 years. And I had the same issue on my WRX when I had those as well. The finish is just not nicely done. They chip easily. So keep that in mind if you are interested in them. I'm not sure about the bronze finish or the silver finish that those wheels come in as well, but I know the Titan just does not hold up very well, and I was kind of disappointed. I could always end up refinishing them, but it was one of those things like, I just love the color so much. And at that point, I really wanted to try and get my dream set of wheels. So after running the WedsSport TC105Xs for about a year, year and a half or so, I decided to go after a dream set. Now, this is my most expensive set of wheels I have ever ran on any car. And those ended up being one of my favorite, probably most underrated Volk wheel, and that is the CE28s. Now, I picked up a special kind of limited edition. They are the CE28 CRs, which stands for Club Racer 2s. And those things were absolutely beautiful. The spec that I ran on them are 18 by 9.5 plus 35. So it was the same exact spec as the RS05RRs. Beautiful set of wheels. Honestly, I felt guilty about driving on them. The tires that I ran on there were also the cream of the crop tire. They were the Michelin Sport Cup 2s in 265/35/18. The Cup 2s were amazing tires, super beefy, not the greatest in the wet, but like I said, I only drove this car in the warm, drier days, so I didn't have to worry about it too much. And honestly, those tires run super, super wide, and I wish I went 255/35s on those. So if I ever did it again in Sport Cup 2s, I would go 255. I think it would fit a little bit better. I was forced to run pretty aggressive camber. The STI, in terms of alignment specs, I currently and had to run over -4 degrees of camber in the front and rear to fit those tires for the height that I was at. So pretty darn aggressive. It looked very good, but I wasn't crazy happy with the front fitment since I had to run so much camber. If I was running 255s, I would probably be able to dial that out and would fit much better. But overall, a great set of tires and wheels. I actually ran a set of CE28s on my M3. I did run them in 19, so it was a little bit different looking overall since there was a wider lip in the rear. Obviously, there was a staggered setup. It wasn't a squared. And they were in different finish. They were called Formula Silver. Beautiful set of wheels, and honestly, one of my favorite Volk wheels that is offered. The whole entire setup with the wheel and tires and everything was over $5 grand, so it was pretty darn expensive to run them. Now, a lot of people always ask me, is it worth it to run such an expensive set of wheels on your car? Yes, it was definitely worth it. I think they looked great. Do I think they're much better in terms of how they perform on the car? No, I think the WedsSports and the Enkeis that I ran and everything, overall the car felt the same. Nothing really changed. To me, it was more of just a bucket list thing that I wanted to check, and I'm really happy I got a chance to do it. But if I were to ever do it again, I don't think I would go so expensive. I would probably just go with a simple set of Enkeis or something, or another set of 57DRs, something really simple that still looks good, but is really more cost effective. The overall finish on those was beautiful. I had them in diamond dark gunmetal. One of my favorite colors that Volks offer. They held up very, very well in terms of the finish. No scratching, no pitting, nothing. And didn't have any issues with those overall. Now that you guys know that I am selling the STI, so what I wanted to do was actually sell off the Volks since they were so expensive. I didn't want to sell the car with those. And I was planning to pick up some OEM 19s or 18s. But a really cool trade kind of fell into my lap locally. Instead of getting some OEM wheels, I decided to do this trade. It ended up working out in my favor. I was able to get a really nice set of aftermarket wheels that works with the car well, and honestly I think looks better than OEM. And I made out pretty well where I was able to make pretty much all my money back that I spent on the Volks. And those wheels are on the car right now, and those are the wheels that I'm going to be selling the car with, but let's check them out. Because I'm sure people are interested, and they are definitely a cool set of wheels. And the wheels that I'm referring to are Enkeis. We're back to Enkei. These are Enkei TS10s in gloss black, much less aggressive than I'm used to running. These are an 18 by 8.5 plus 50. So it's pretty close to OEM spec. OEM spec is 18 by 8.5 plus 55. These are 5 millimeters more pushed out. But when I got these in the trade, I also got some Speed 20 millimeter spacers. So it actually pushed it out another 20 millimeters. So I'm looking at plus 30 right here. I'm still running a pretty aggressive amount of camber. I did dial out the front a little bit, so it's not as crazy, but they do fit really well. And I think it fits the car very, very nicely. I love the gloss black. And the tires, we're actually back to the Continental DWS06s. The sizing of these tires is actually stock tire spec. They're 245/40 18s. So a much thicker tire overall in terms of height than I have been running on this car. So it's very, very comfortable to drive. And it does look really good. I'm really happy with the overall fitment and look, you know, just for something really, really simple. Obviously the rear, I'm still running a pretty decent amount of camber. So it is dialed in a decent amount, but the black looks really good on Lapis Blue. And honestly, I'm happy that I got these instead of the OEM 18s or 19s. I just think these look way better and way more desirable on this car than if the car was just, you know, with the stock 18s or 19s. Now, I didn't change the height of the car. I'm still very, very low. So I can dial out a ton of camber. I'd probably only have to run like -1.5 to maybe 2, if that, and would fit much better. You can dial it out a decent amount. I think I'm around -3.5 in the front right now. So you don't need that much to run these, and you can get them to fit much better, but I don't want to dial it out so much that I would need a complete new alignment. So I just kind of played around with the front fitment a little bit. So I'm around -3.5, so not that bad. But overall, these set of wheels are very, very nice. I'm really happy with the trade, and it ended up working out very, very well. And yeah, that is my final set of wheels that I am running on the STI. Now, there's a ton of other wheels out there that I would love to try, but as you guys know, like I said, this is for sale right now, so I'm not going to get that option. But if I ever were to do it again, like I said, I would probably run something a little bit more simpler. I'd probably run another set of Enkeis or 57 DRs or something like that, just because I really didn't see the need to spend so much on wheels. I was just as happy with the Enkei RS05RRs or the 57 DRs or any other wheel that I ran other than the Volks. The Volks are super nice and I really did enjoy them. But what I'm trying to get at is you don't need to spend a lot of money on wheels to make the car look really good. There's a huge range of wheels for this car that look really good. It doesn't matter if you're spending $5 grand or $1,000 you know, there's plenty of options. So I hope you guys enjoyed that. I hope you guys kind of enjoyed the journey of going through all the different setups that I ran on this car. It was a lot of them, but I love getting new wheels. New wheel day is always one of my favorite days. You know, just getting them to fit right and looking right and everything. Wheels change the entire look of the car. Anytime that I was like, you know, this car's, I wish there was something different. I wish I could change something up. I'd always go to wheels because wheels completely change the overall look. And it always made me fall back in love with the car no matter what. So if you're ever having those feelings and you're like, oh, you know, I don't know if I should sell it or not, get a new set of wheels, try it out. You'll fall in love with the car all over again. Hope going over all these, going over the fitment and everything kind of helps some of you guys out if you are interested in any of these, or even the sizing and everything that I ran. It's really not that hard to get wheels to fit very, very well on this car. And that is one of the best things about the WRX and STI. The aftermarket support is insane. So many different wheels, different colors, different specs, different brands that you can choose from to get your car looking exactly the way that you want it. So that's going to wrap up this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you have any questions about any of the wheel setups that I ran or anything else on the car, be sure to ask them below. But in the meantime, keep it clean, keep it simple, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.